All right, welcome everyone to another episode of Ventures Podcast. Today we've got a great list of topics for you. We're going to be diving into a deep dive on space and space technology. We will be talking about the latest startup requests from Y Combinator as well as A16z. So what they're expecting to be popular areas to build startups in 2025. We're going to talk about Spotify's early days and what allowed them to be the winner in the music streaming industry. We're going to talk about The Launchpad, a wonderful book that details Y Combinator in detail, the most successful Silicon Valley startup accelerator. We're going to talk about what we're building at SlashDev and how you can build a backend for a task management system like Asana. And then we're going to dive into some of the latest AI news, from OpenAI's release of O3 to open source models like DeepSeek becoming state of the art. So let's dive into it and see what we got going this week. All right, so to kick things off, let's talk about space tech. So the first topic we want to cover is this idea of a new space station. So we'll talk in a bit more broadly about the space industry, some of the top players, but we thought it was really interesting. Emmanuel actually found that the ISS is going to be retired in 2030, if I'm not mistaken. Correct?
Right, yes, at least they're planning so. And then we have all these other private companies that are trying to at least compete to be the new space station. And I think now towards some of the later slides that we have up, Haven or Vast is one of these private companies. I think it was also recently started. It's a freshly startup, and they have the Haven 2 with their modules, their modular design, basically. And I think it's really cool how they have come up with a pretty interesting concept and also a timeline of how to launch this.
Awesome.
Maybe we can pull this up as well right now.
Definitely. So here we have, so Vast Space is the company. This is Haven 2. So obviously founded in 2021, still proving themselves, but a very interesting project. So this isn't something that's guaranteed to happen, but something for anyone who's interested in space that gets you pumped up and excited to see, kind of pushing the frontiers of technology and really finding a way to replace the ISS, because if I'm not mistaken, the ISS is the most expensive human-made structure ever built. So estimated cost of over $150 billion with ongoing operational costs and billions and billions each year in maintenance and upgrades and fixes. So obviously this isn't a commercial business project. This is a international collaboration on space research and science, really. And so if we take a look here at what Vast Space is trying to do, I think this is really fun to see. So, we've got a similar kind of look to the ISS here. So you've got your pods here and all your solar panels, sleeping areas, training areas, so that you can stay fit, even though you're not having gravity to support your body. Tons of research equipment, I'm sure. And this is pretty cool to see. So here, any minute now, we have the timeline of how they expect to do this. So starting in 2028, Haven 2 modules will launch approximately every 6 months, with a final station configuration slated for 2032. So this is going to be module by module. So you see first this Haven module, then they will get the second module, third, and just like Lego blocks, they will start building this thing and add a core in which they can connect and reconfigure and extend the core. So really cool stuff. This is like a Lego. Lego space kit for anyone. So, I really hope they succeed. I definitely have questions about the viability of projects like this, specifically because the ISS was the most expensive human project of all time, arguably. There's other highly expensive projects, but it's right up there. Um, if I'm not mistaken, it was started by the Russians, I believe, and then basically after the fall of the Soviet Union, kind of picked up by the US and the Europeans to help support it and build it out to what it is today. So it was never a profitable uh, venture. There was no business model behind it. And so, depending on where we're at in the world, if we're dealing with a world with lots of conflicts, it might not be the first thing that people want to spend their money on. But it's definitely something that we need to move towards if we want to be a spacefaring civilization and really be able to take that next step. So, really cool stuff here to see and to see the progress there. Yeah, and I can highly recommend this. The other week to prepare for this, I watched a 5-hour YouTube series on space technology. It's free documentary engineering is the channel. Really great stuff, and they go through everything from space telescopes to communication, Mars, Saturn, the ISS. So here they go in detail about the whole history of the International Space Station and where it's at today. They talk about other planets that we've looked at, all the different missions that we've made to different planets and the probes that we've sent. So it's incredible the history of all the things we've done in space. You forget just how many probes and how much information we've gathered from space, as well as things like the actual spacesuits as well might be in the ISS section where they show like the very early astronaut suits and then where they're at today. So super cool stuff here as well. I can highly recommend that. All right, great. So then, of course, we have to talk about SpaceX, the company that continues to redefine the space industry, flipped launching on its head, making rockets reusable and cutting the cost to launch exponentially. So when we look at SpaceX and we just look at the overall space tech market, one of the first things I wanted to know is what's the market size of these different opportunities. So when we look at the space industry, the biggest market is satellite services. There we're looking at about 125 to 150 billion of services in space right now. The second biggest market would be ground equipment. So this coordinates everything that goes on in space. So this is all the really high power radars, observation equipments, terminals, gateways, launch pads, etc. That's around 130 to 140 billion. Satellite manufacturing, you take a big step down. That's a 12 to 15 billion dollar market. And then launch services is a 6 to 8 billion dollar market, so a bit smaller even. And so, when I first thought of SpaceX and launch services, I didn't realize how much smaller the launch market was than the satellite services market. But it makes a lot of sense. I mean, one of the first satellites, commercial satellites, I believe it was AT&T, launched one of the first commercial satellites where you could broadcast television through that satellite. And that's really just the business model that makes the most sense. I mean, what is SpaceX doing now? They're focused on Starlink and making it so low Earth orbit satellites can help you get internet access anywhere around the world. So, really cool stuff. Got a few things to show here just to kind of put things in perspective. So, first of all, one thing I think that's really important to see to put you in the frame of where we're at in history is if you just look at the world that we were in 1958, we were talking, but we were just starting to launch things into space. 49 launches, 14 here. And then when we zip forward in time to today, what I really think of when I see this is we're on the exponential curve of space now. And now we are at the full machine gun stage of space where we are launching more launches per year than ever. And so SpaceX is doing some crazy frequency of launches these days, bringing things into space and also dropping the cost of launching into space. So during the early space shuttle days, we're talking like 50,000+ per kilogram to get that material into space. Now we're talking $200 when we're looking at the Starship. And even, $1,600 for the Falcon Heavy was still a huge jump. So what does this do economically when we have space flight being so much more affordable? And now a small company could afford to launch a modular satellite, which expands the whole industry of who can play here, who can launch satellites, and what can be done. So really cool stuff going on. Elon actually recently tweeted you can now watch live sports in 8K in Antarctica with Starlink. So you're going to see more global internet access. I mean, it's going to be hard to compete with Starlink when you have to lay fiber as an alternative. So really cool stuff to see. Yeah, do you have any thoughts on that, Emmanuel?
I mean, not many, but I was kind of interested in seeing how Starlink does in Germany, and because obviously Germany prohibits a lot of things, and when it comes to innovation, they're not well. When it comes to adopting new innovation, I don't think they're on the top of the list. But I just realized also that they quite recently also adopted Starlink Mini, I think it was called, in Germany. So I was actually kind of surprised to see that this thing is actually it's actually becoming big all around Europe as well. So that's kind of nice to see.
Yeah,
I
that's
think it goes
awesome.
from I remember seeing it from 50 US dollars for or 40 US dollars for 50 gigabytes or something like that. I can't recall the specifics anymore, but I think seeing this also blue in Germany is something that I was never expecting. But
Yeah, I mean, it was only a few years ago that I remember my friend's dad had Starlink out at a kind of rural cabin, and that was really cool. And it functioned way better than the actual internet out there. And then, just that was maybe, 2018 or so, I want to say. I could be wrong. But then just a few years later, and we have Starlink being used way more frequently all around the world. You have it being used in crisis situations like Ukraine. You have it to where you can actually get streaming while flying around the world. So really cool stuff. And, this is just the start for SpaceX. SpaceX, I've seen many VCs on Twitter talking about how this is the most popular private company that everyone wants to invest in and get a piece of. So obviously Starlink satellites, I want to say they have 700+ satellites right now in their cluster. Let me double check that and see where we're at right now. Oh, way
maybe.
off, way off. So they're at 6,900 satellites in orbit in the Starlink cluster right now. Just crazy. And they have all of these orbiting in a mesh so that they cross each other and transmit data to each other, and basically can keep you covered and keep you having high bandwidth internet wherever you are. So really incredible.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm just really quickly going back to the topic about Germany because something that I find really interesting. I mean, I don't want to play devil's advocate, but I mean, I'm from Germany, so when I think about it, sometimes Germany, when it comes to internet, especially, I think they are one of the countries that haven't even adopted yet fiber optics. like completely. I mean, I think the coverage is at 35% or something like that. I'm not quite sure, but I think there's huge demand then for this. The Starlink in Germany, especially because, as far as I remember it, like we're still using copper cables to get our internet.
Hmm.
We're still using
Hmm.
the traditional way to do it, and the main reason why we're not switching it is because of the costs that come up. But I think Starlink would be a cost-effective way to actually transition to maybe something that's more reliable and fast.
Yeah, definitely. It at least gives you the choice, even if your city doesn't want to lay fiber, to be able to get really high speed internet, which is critical if you want to be able to use a lot of the latest technologies or have real time interaction with some of these LLMs as well. It's really interesting. So it looks like Germany, about 43% of households have access to fiber, but only 22% have activated those connections. Interesting.
I think I
And I can
remember.
see Germany has a lower internet adoption than the US. Germany has internet penetration of about 93%, while the US has 97% internet adoption by its
I,
population.
I
Really
think I
interesting.
remember seeing somewhere like a news from the Deutsche Telekom, which is the major internet provider in Germany, and I think, but this was a while ago. I don't remember 2020 or 2021, maybe even 2019. I'm not sure. And I remember reading on it, and they said that the main reason why they haven't switched yet to fiber optics is because it's just that much more expensive, and that the copper cable's working perfectly fine, and that they would just engineer the best copper cables out there to cover for internet. And in my eyes, I was just thinking, okay, so we're just doing this whole, electric vehicle scheme again. Germany was so late to adopting electric vehicles until it was too late, and I see it kind of happening with internet as well. So I think Starlink, maybe in the future, I don't want to jinx anything, but maybe we could see this uh, grow really big in Germany.
Interesting. When I hear that, I think of somebody who already makes all the money laying that copper wire, not wanting to give up their contracts. That's what I think of. Because
Yeah,
it's
it
like,
could be.
why would you not lay the fiber optic? But yeah, interesting. Interesting. I also listened to a really good podcast. One of the best podcasts out there, I think, is Acquired. And they have the ACQ2, which is a sub podcast where they interview founders. And so it's actually called Starfish Space. It's a Seattle based space company. These guys previously worked at Blue Origin and are now building out a satellite company to maintain or decommission other satellites, because the satellite space is getting so crowded, right? I mean, we're filling up the Earth's orbit. There's several different orbit layers that we use, and we're just launching more and more stuff into space. So yeah, it's really interesting. I can quickly show what they're doing. And it was exciting to see just how much space technology is happening around Seattle for me, being from that area. But this is Starfish Space, and their satellite is called Otter, and it goes out and does maintenance and repair, and as well as safe ejection, where they make sure that they launch it out so that it is not just floating junk in orbit, but gets safely decommissioned. And yeah, I mean, here you can see like a visualization of the actual satellites that we have around the Earth today, which is crazy. And yeah, this is kind of their satellite and what they do. So really cool stuff. And this would not be possible if it wasn't so affordable to launch things to space. Probably a good transition to another major player, Blue Origin, also looking to compete in the launch market and the space tourism market. So I know Blue Origin did send a crew of people, like a private group of citizens to space to do a flight. I believe Jeff Bezos was on that with them, actually, as well as a few other high wealth individuals who decided they wanted to do this. But just great to see other players really pushing things and innovating in this space. As I showed earlier with the launches, we're going parabolic right now. So like the more companies there are that are doing this, the better, because as it gets cheaper to bring things into space, it makes it easier for entrepreneurs to then start a satellite company, or maybe I want to run different experiments in space. So I need a satellite that can actually do that and can be exposed to these situations. And satellite engineering is so interesting because space is such a different environment than being on Earth. It's so much more unforgiving. Everything has to be able to be fixed on its own. You're never going to have a person who can go and fix your satellite. You're going to have, higher radiation levels. You're going to just have a much more harsh environment on which your electronics need to function, your solar panels need to function, and your optics need to function. So really a fascinating industry overall. Which have you heard of the New Zealand company that's also in the space industry?
No, I don't think so.
Let me pull this up really quick. Rocket Lab, easy to remember.
Oh, okay.
There's this thing on Twitter or X where people just say, just do things, right? And this guy's like an entrepreneur in New Zealand, in the not a country that's really leading in space, but just started building rockets and just made it happen, which is awesome to see. If you're just passionate about it and just keep pushing, you can do it. So they're actually, doing launches from New Zealand and innovating and, building out their own launch solution and then taking satellites up. So super cool to see what they're doing as well. And the founders done, there's YouTube videos about what they've done and everything, and really cool to see. So I just wanted to give them a quick shout out. Rocket Lab doing awesome stuff. Yeah. All right, great. So now another kind of space aspirational topic is going to the moon again, right? So the idea is, can we actually stay on the moon, work on the moon long term? So this is something more and more people are thinking about. Elon's talking about going multiplanetary, getting to Mars. Obviously, one of the first things we think about is going to the moon. I mean, it's right there. We can see it. We've been there. So why don't we go there and build a moon base? Obviously, I think the biggest problem with this is similar to the ISS, where what's the business model? And we're talking about massive costs and what's the potential return, right? But both China and the US are looking at going back to the moon. We've got NASA with its Artemis missions, which already has, I believe, the first mission, the unmanned mission, has already gone out, but they have several other missions planned to really start moving towards the moon again, seeing if we can establish a moon base. Super interesting stuff. Emmanuel, I know you were looking at this. What kind of stood out to you?
Yeah. So like, I think I'm also kind of having a hard time thinking about the feasibility of this. But I think the possibility are endless. I mean, if we do manage to kind of create a station at the moon, I mean, like you said before, everything that's in space kind of has to be done autonomous. We have to repair things. So I think it might be a little bit more easier if we have that space station on the moon. I mean, these are all speculations from my side and a little bit of videos like the ones from Bloomberg News. But I think it could accelerate things like space manufacturing that we're not going to go into detail to. But for example, chemical manufacturing. I think having a station at the moon can definitely be a huge support for this. When things are too dangerous to manufacture on Earth. And maybe we can use the moon as a fueling station. I'm no expert in space, but I think it would sound pretty cool having Elon Musk's rockets launch back and forth from the moon. Maybe there's less fuel requirement that they need to take off the moon because gravity is lower there. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah,
but
definitely. I think it's an awesome dream to have a moon base, right? It's just like, what's the feasibility? But that's a good question to solve, right? Because if we can find a way to make a business model from being on the moon and actually get some materials that we need on Earth, or do some sort of manufacturing process, or really be able to sustainably live there and create a functioning economy on the moon, that's how we're going to have it make sense to go to Mars as well, right? So I think ultimately, this is a good step along that path. Yeah, so I mean, we'll never do as good of a job as a 5.5 hour documentary of running you through the whole space industry. There's lots of different deep dives on all these companies, um, from Starfish to Rocket Lab, SpaceX, Blue Origin, all of these. There's a ton of players out there, and a lot of good information to study. So I highly recommend you check out the space industry and just see what's going on. I think we're in the very early days of what's going to be going on in space, and potentially an era where entrepreneurs can really play in the space industry just with, a few $100,000 of investment or whatever it might be. You might be able to actually get a satellite into orbit, start playing around. So super cool stuff. And then the Vast Haven, we already covered this, so kind of jumped through that a little bit earlier, but maybe we'll be able to renew the ISS and replace it when it is decommissioned in 2030. All right, awesome. This brings us to startups and what people are recommending to build in 2025. So both A16Z and Y Combinator released their, Y Combinator actually released their request for startups for winter 2025. And then A16Z released their big ideas in tech for 2025. So I can just kind of run through these, and Emmanuel, we can talk about what's interesting, but these are two companies that fund. A16Z is the biggest venture capital firm in the world and fund a lot of the most interesting new innovative companies in the world. Y Combinator is the most successful startup accelerator in the world and focuses a lot on high growth software startups, but also has some moonshots as well, and more ambitious projects. And these guys look at companies and pitches every day, and this is what they recommend is going to happen in 2025 and what you should be building in 2025. So if we start with A16Z, first category is American dynamism. So the nuclear resurgence rather. AI data centers will drive unprecedented demand for nuclear power, reviving decommissioned plants and spurring new reactor construction. A lot of talk about this in Europe as well, a lot of talk in Sweden about this. What can happen to lower energy costs and then make manufacturing more viable? The second category under American dynamism, hardware software jobs, growing demand for engineers who can bridge hardware software gaps in manufacturing, robotics, and industrial automation. Number three, the space frontier, as we talked about earlier. I'll try to run through this a little bit quicker so that we don't spend too long. So I'll just kind of rip through this. Second category is bio and health. So anything focused on solving common diseases. Health tech democratization. We're seeing, look at what LLMs are doing to health tech. It's making it way easier to get information you need at your fingertips. AI super staffing in the health industry. Third category is consumer, specialized AI video, AI memory banks, personalized knowledge work, qualitative data analysis. Fourth category is crypto, of course, coming from A16Z. These guys are backing crypto. They believe in the blockchain like nobody else. So that's, one of their main focuses. AI wallets, autonomous chatbots focused on decentralized autonomous chatbots that will emerge as independent entities, proof of personhood, crypto app stores. Next category, enterprise fintech, pretty standard stuff. AI native interfaces kind of stands out to me. I definitely think everything's going to be rebuilt with LLMs in mind and AI native functionality in mind. Gaming, of course, gaming just continues to explode. So AI native storytelling, living AI companions, faceless creators. This gaming, I think, is going to just get so cool because it's going to be better storytelling, better game development, more customization. So really, I think the next 10 years of gaming is going to be unreal to watch. Second to last category, growth stage tech. So search disruption. So Google's getting disrupted, obviously. Who's going to take that space? Sales renaissance. AI automation will lead to increased hiring of sales representatives. Interesting. Infrastructure, AI computing centers, edge AI growth, and AI reasoning progress. Cool. So yeah, more information here if you want to check it out. And obviously plenty of podcasts where Mark Andreessen and Ben Horowitz talk about this type of stuff, as well as other A16Z partners. But anything that jumps out to you, Emmanuel?
I think maybe, well, the first thing that came to my mind is when you said health tech, especially the AI super staffing. I was just imagining myself being for a dental checkup, and then just having a robot just go into your teeth and checking everything up and fixing all the things that you need. I mean,
Yeah,
it
right.
was just a kind of humorous idea that I had in my mind, and I think it would be quite funny to see as well. But I think it'll be also quite interesting to see how that affects cost as well. If we think about how much does it then cost to go to a dentist, for example, because usually, for example, in Germany, we also have this crisis going on there, and I'm pretty sure it's also in other countries as well, that you have staffing problems, that there are not enough staff compared to the people coming in to hospitals or private clinics. So basically,
Yep.
it'll be interesting to see if that could maybe create cheaper costs for people then to get their dental health care or their yearly checkups. Um, yeah. And then another one
Definitely.
that I found pretty interesting was the gaming aspect. I think we covered this also in the last episode where we talked about Sora AI. I think
Mm-hmm.
that would be just incredible to see how good the graphics will look like at some point, because I think there
Mm-hmm.
was I forgot which post this was from or who said this, and they mentioned that a huge problem with game development and realism is that you can't video games can't be too realistic or can't be extremely realistic, because if video games try to do this and they're not as realistic as possible, then it kind of turns off the engagement or the attractiveness of that video game. So it's either you develop the game that isn't 100% realistic, or you try to achieve a 100% realistic physics, all that
Mm-hmm.
stuff into a video game. And I think
Mm-hmm.
now with AI kind of contributing to now video generation, I think we could see some really some huge advancement in the gaming industry in terms of graphics, in terms of visuals. So I think that would be pretty cool.
Definitely. I just think very soon the developers are going to be so much more focused on the details, but the generation of these massive maps of all of this information is going to be so much faster. Like, I don't see why, I used to play World of Warcraft a bit, but if you look at even, some of the newer games that are out there as well, where you have these massive worlds you can go into and play, I don't see why you're not going to be able to customize those. Maybe there's something that you don't like about this raid or this quest, or you just think that you could make it better, or something that's more customized to you and your friends when you're playing together, where you want to be able to have a giant basketball hoop as a sword, or you want this. It's like augmenting the game is going to be so much easier, because things like building out the pixels for that are going to be very fast. And maybe it's messed up and the basketball hoop has like 3 backboards, but maybe that's funny. So who cares, right? It's just, I think it's going to move fast, and you're going to be able to,
Yeah.
you're not going to need people grinding away on the details of these pixels for the tree or these lakes or whatever you're trying to build. So creativity is going to explode, where it's not just the people like laying the Minecraft bricks, but it's the people working with the LLMs to design their own world. And you can do the pixel details as well, but you can get so much more heavy lifting done. So definitely.
Yeah, I just had just a funny comment to this. I know we still don't have GTA 6 out yet, but maybe GTA 7 will be a lot faster out with with
Yeah,
AI becoming that good.
definitely. I mean, Google said that a quarter of their code is being written by AI. So if the game studios are anywhere close to that, that's going to increase their effectiveness so much. And maybe you'll even see smaller game studios really resurge, because if the cost of building a really good game goes down, it's more about creativity and like what hits. And so it's more likely that a small team can build a really good game, which is awesome. All right, cool. So now let's dive into YC's request for startups winter 2025 and see what the top accelerator in Silicon Valley has to say. So they have 5 categories here. First, government and public safety. Build LLMs to automate specific government tasks, create computer vision systems for license plate detection and crime prevention. Of course, Silicon Valley is trying to figure out crime prevention because they're just drowning in crime there. Of course, I mean, they got to get it together. You got to get better leadership in San Francisco, that's for sure. Build software that reduces police paperwork time from hours to minutes. Create tools for emergency response coordination and dispatch. Build platforms that help communities and law enforcement communicate effectively. Interesting, they have a whole category on this, specifically like government and crime reduction, but cool to see. Second, manufacturing. Build ML-powered robotic systems that reduce labor costs in U.S. manufacturing. Create automation tools specifically for American factories. Build specialized industrial robots for factory inspection. Develop systems that help manufacturers operate efficiently in U.S. industrial hubs. Third category, chips and engineering. Build LLM tools specifically for FPGA design and optimization. Create AI systems for ASIC design that reduce development cost. Build tools that optimize specialized computation. Developed AI-powered CAD software. Fourth category, stable coins. Interesting. A whole category on stable coins specifically. Build platforms for businesses to hold and manage stablecoins, create tools to make it easy for developers to integrate stablecoin payments, build systems for banks to issue their own stablecoins, develop infrastructure for cross-border stablecoin payments. And finally, new jobs. Create tools to help people run local service businesses. Build platforms enabling people to earn income providing services online. Create systems that help service providers work more effectively with AI assistants. Develop tools that help small businesses operate at the same level as large corporations. It's a really focused list from YC, I have to say. Like the government policy area is very interesting. And I think some of this also has to do with where they see demand and where they think they have partnerships that need this. So obviously, where's a good place to have crime technology? San Francisco would be a great place to have better crime technology. Manufacturing is a huge topic right now, so they're focused on that. AI chips, stablecoins. Also, I've been hearing a lot of chatter about how useful stablecoins are. SpaceX is actually using stablecoins to take payment from international users of Starlink so that they don't have to take the foreign exchange risk. Interesting to see. And then, yeah, online services and running businesses more effectively, kind of like bread and butter, software improving the way the businesses work. So, interesting list. What do you think, Emmanuel?
Yeah, I might be one of those people who enjoy stablecoins as well. Yeah,
Nice.
I
Yeah.
use it mainly to also to transfer money because it's just that much quicker,
Mm-hmm.
reliable, and
Mm-hmm.
no weird fees behind something. But then at the same time, I wonder because now you have all these other newer payment methods, right? Like Wise, you have Revolut, and they're now making this also a lot more quicker and a lot more easier and faster to receive money, send money, etc. Obviously, it doesn't have that decentralization to it as stablecoins have, but it will be interesting. But for sure, I mean, seeing this expand, I mean, I know about, well, the main stablecoins, for example, that I have sent or received was USDT or USDC, for example. I
Hmm.
wonder if there's a Euro stablecoin as well. I haven't looked that much into it, but uh,
What
it will
platform
be
do you
interesting.
use to buy and sell the stable coins?
Crypto.com.
Crypto.com. Okay.
Yeah,
Not
but
FTX.
no,
Yeah,
unfortunately not. I think it's
not
just because
good.
Crypto.com is kind of a little bit easier to use in the EU because Europe has so many regulations. It's crazy.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting
So.
to hear. Yeah, that's awesome. No, Wise is definitely really easy, but
Mhm.
you know, you're still paying fees on quite a lot of stuff.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
the stable coins just seem easier.
Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah,
But
those are the two lists for startups for A16Z and YC. So really interesting stuff. And of course, you can also see the startup directory for YC to see a lot of the companies that they've funded. Great place to get ideas and see what people are building. So highly recommend you stay in the loop on what these guys are doing. Sorry, did you have something to add, Emmanuel?
yeah, exactly. But I just adding to what you said before about not Starlink, it's the company called SpaceX
Hmm.
accepting. Oh yeah, exactly. SpaceX accepting payments via stablecoins for their Starlink for international subscriptions. I actually find that quite interesting, and I would love to see this also become more prominent at other stores. Perhaps maybe you'll be able to pay with stablecoins for Google services and products. I mean, it's very interesting, and I think
Hmm.
a lot of work can be done within this area.
Definitely. There are several Euro stable coins. So both Tether and Circle have a Euro stable coin,
Oh, okay.
as well as several others. So yeah, really interesting. All right, cool. So let's dive into Spotify, a Swedish legend of a company, an iconic company, and their early days. So how was Spotify able to win in the music streaming industry when no one else was able to? And why didn't a US company emerge quite as big as Spotify in recent years as being the main place to go to stream your music? So this is an awesome story. I highly recommend checking out the Netflix miniseries, the playlist that kind of does a dramatized documentary of this and goes through Daniel Ek and his story, the visionary CEO of the company, as well as many of the other players who played a role in the early days of Spotify's founding. So, if we just kind of try to do a little mini history lesson here, Spotify was founded around the time when the Pirate Bay was really the main player. When you would go on the Pirate Bay and you would download all your music and then upload it to your MP3 player or play it on your computer. And this was a time when the large record companies were getting totally smashed because their business models were based on selling CDs and albums and completely controlling the music and who had access to it. And now with the internet, they had lost control of their catalog of music and it was now getting downloaded for free around the world. And the record companies were incredibly hesitant to work with any of these platforms, and Spotify managed to emerge. Basically, from my understanding, both studying this a little bit and watching that documentary, Spotify started out wanting to also be a free music service, just with a much better user interface and much better experience. So when you looked at the Pirate Bay, you go on, you search a song, you identify what file you want to download. You're then torrenting that from whatever other users have it around the internet, and could be potentially a virus. could take a very long time to download, and then you finally got it. So it's a long process to get the music that you wanted. And Spotify was able to build a hybrid peer-to-peer network that allowed you to stream this music with almost no buffering. So basically they both had a beautiful UI that was like the perfect music player, as well as an incredible technical architecture that made it so they had essentially no buffering, because the buffering time was so low the human brain can barely perceive anything below, I believe it was like 2 milliseconds or something that they were trying to hit, and they got very close to that target. So they started out looking at doing servers, and in a server network you have all your music in servers, and then you just stream, you select the music you want, and you're routed to that song, and the server sends you that. The problem with that business model is, at the time of Spotify's founding, server space was too expensive for that to make sense. So they had to try to do a peer-to-peer network model. And they worked with, and I believe they purchased uTorrent early on, one of the major torrenting sites that also had a peer-to-peer network, to kind of learn that architecture. And so what they did is they would use that peer-to-peer network, and they would use learning techniques, algorithms, simpler algorithms, to identify what music a user liked. So if I'm going in and I want to play some electronic music or some AC/DC or whatever it might be, Spotify is going to know that that's what Michael likes to play. So it's already going to have those kind of prioritized and buffering and ready to go, so that it can identify that and get it ready to play. But on about 10% of searches, I'm going to search something totally different than what I usually listen to. And that's the real problem, where they couldn't really engineer the system to predict what you wanted to listen to. They couldn't kind of front load that to you so that it was ready to play. And what they did is they did a fallback method, where then they would have a server that would handle those kind of long tail searches. That was one innovation. But there was also something really cool they did, and it was done really well in this mini series. But essentially, the internet has a protocol called TCP, right? And TCP controls the flow of the internet, kind of like a traffic light. And the internet was made to safely send information from here to here without losing any of that information. And so it lets you know when it's a green light, send the information at this, miles per hour, so to say, or this frequency of packets that you're sending. And what Spotify was able to do was actually design their own protocol that kind of broke the speed limit, and when the light turned yellow, sped up and tried to send information at a higher rate. And so they prioritized the first part of songs, and really didn't care if they lost a little bit of data, because it wasn't really you couldn't perceive it as a user. What you could perceive was a long lag for the song starting. But as long as you hear that guitar start or that beat start going, you're not going to notice if a little bit of the song is slightly different, because a small amount of data was lost in that transfer. So I believe they actually patented that protocol, and they might have there was some other frameworks developed by Google as well that were kind of similar, where they were losing some data but prioritizing speed. But there was both a beautiful UI and incredible technical innovation in what went into Spotify, as well as just relentlessly getting said no to and pushing forward, and eventually securing some great partnerships. So, Emmanuel, maybe you can talk about how they were able to get partnerships with these record labels in Europe in order to secure these music catalogs.
Yeah, I kind of got lost while you were explaining about the technical aspect, because it was so interesting. I actually didn't look at that part at all. But going
Is there
into
any questions you had about it? I mean,
Oh no, not at all. It was just super interesting. It was very interesting, and I kind of I was kind of
Yeah, a lot of
researching
it is
about.
covered in the playlist, so you can check that out.
Okay.
They do a really good idea of a good job rather of covering like what they did technically in order to
Mm,
solve this.
okay.
So yeah, it's really impressive and
Yeah.
some good information I was never aware of. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, so they're initial partners, right? So I think if I mean obviously they were in they joined the industry when it was where piracy was a huge thing. But
Hmm.
I think the timing of it was also really, really good because essentially what happened is that CD sales were decreasing, especially for like the big four back then, Universal, or I mean, they still are Universal Music Group, Sony Music, Warner Music Group, and what was the last one? EMI.
Hmm.
Yeah. So basically, they didn't have anything to lose when Spotify came up to them and was like, "Hey, would you like to partner up with us?" And they gave them a back catalog, uh, uh, telling them, "Hey, you can use uh, this catalog and uh, put them on your Spotify platform." And that's how it kind of started out, how it started to grow. And basically, all this was mainly focused on growing their freemium model. So
Hmm.
that's how Spotify started to grow in the early days, towards 2006 to 2010.
Hmm.
And you can kind of tie it with the product market fit.
Definitely. So
Yeah.
another interesting bit from the miniseries. So Spotify wanted to be basically like the Pirate Bay, but a way better user experience. They wanted to be free, and the development team especially really believed in that. They wanted to be free. They wanted to kind of say "f you" to the labels and be free. But there's no business model behind being free, so they eventually had to find a way to actually make money. And unless this miniseries is just totally messing with me, which I think it was very grounded in facts, basically what they did there is they made it free to go on and to play music. But when you build out your playlist, you have to pay in order to build out those playlists. And that was a very interesting strategy because then they could really get people on and using it. And, maybe they allowed you to build one playlist or whatever, but they started to charge you the Spotify fee in order to build playlists and to maintain your playlists and add on to them. And so that was kind of their early innovation. And obviously, they went on to then, not be free and to charge money and just win on user experience. So
Yeah.
really interesting stuff. And that, I mean, maybe that's a good transition. Obviously, then they went into the United States and were able to succeed there. I think, Emmanuel, you did some research on some of the critical partnerships that they did there in order to
Yep.
really get a foothold.
Yeah, exactly. Before I dive into this, you don't have to go back to the previous slide, but something that I found really interesting was that, and I didn't know this before, and don't quote me on this either because I'm not sure if it's 100% fact, but what I didn't know is that these big four, they used to be the largest shareholders of Spotify because of this deal that they had with them. And then
Yeah.
for me, it was kind of opening my eyes, and I was like, okay, well, that makes a lot of sense. But now coming back
Hmm.
to this part, so what happened is that Spotify, wanted to tap to the U.S. market. They haven't launched at all yet there. So what they decided to do is uh, they decided to partner up with brands such as Coca-Cola, Chevrolet, and Reebok. There's a whole list of these
Hmm.
companies that they partnered up with, but I'm just mentioning a couple. And the whole idea was to advertise this digital product into the US. And something else that they did is they also leveraged virality in their sign-up process by allowing users to invite friends, which also helped ramp up early growth very, very quickly. And something that I find also kind of interesting is that now we're fast forwarding to 2011 to 2014. And there was a point where Spotify now tried to actually launch in the United States and build an office there. But there was a main concern with the big four that were trying to sort out a deal for this to happen.
Hmm.
And and maybe nowadays we see it in a different view because we are in this digital era. But back then, what happened was that the big four, they were actually quite interested in signing the deal. They saw the potential that Spotify had. The only issue was that when looking at their finances, they only saw a 7% margin, which for back
Yeah.
then, all the other companies that used to be brick and mortar, they were like, this is not worth investing. Like there's no traction underneath this. And I find it quite interesting and a little bit hilarious, but I think also I saw a post somewhere about someone mentioning that back then, I think it was Dropbox when that came out. There was some sort of a similar discussion that investors back then were also looking at it or frowned upon it just a little bit. And then they realized that, hold on a minute, 6%, 7% isn't that crazy, especially in the digital market industry. And then basically what happened, at some point they were able to sort out a deal, but I'm not sure if I'm talking too much about this yet. We can jump to the next slide, or
No, this is great overview.
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, from the miniseries as well, they were major investors who then jumped in and got a big piece of this in order to get it to where it is today. And Spotify today, I believe, is headquartered in New York, and obviously, huge in the US market, huge in the European market, global market. And I think that's maybe a good transition to another thing that helped kick off their success in the US market was when Meta, at the time Facebook, adopted them as their primary way of sharing music in their platforms, right? So Spotify really was able to partner with all the big players who knew the right people, whether it was lawyers who knew the right music labels, or whether it was actually the big tech companies or major companies like Coca-Cola that they were able to partner with. So they really climbed to that upper echelon where they were essentially guaranteed to succeed because they were backed by the powers that be, so to say. So that was really interesting. And I guess quick overview as well is one thing they seem to consistently do better than anyone is personalization. So they really, show you your yearly wrap. They show you your explore. They really push a lot of great things. And then one other thing from my perspective that I think is cool about Spotify is they do seem to really back podcasters and content creators to say what they want to say. So during a lot of the Joe Rogan pushback, Spotify was very supportive to Joe Rogan, obviously the largest podcast in the world. And really, Sweden is a country that's very grounded in freedom of speech. So I think that played a big role in their mindset in what they were going to do there. But yeah, really cool to see. And they continue to be very successful. I believe now their financials are doing incredible.
yeah.
I know Daniel Ek tweeted something about it recently, but see if
Something that I found quite interesting though is, I mean, it's not something that's currently happening, but I guess something that I wonder is, for how long can we see Spotify at the top? I mean, will they stay at the top? Because I mean, if we think about it, personalization was their biggest game plan, or at least from my perspective, the user experience and how fresh and how great it is and was. But now we're seeing like competitors, right? Like YouTube Music, Apple Music, Deezer. They're stepping up their game and they're stepping up their user experience. I wonder if that is going to, I don't know, maybe Spotify might suffer a little bit, or maybe they're just so big already that, 90% of users who use it, they don't see any going back now. So,
unfortunately, I think it's a very competitive space. So, it's nothing I would really be super interested in getting into. But an incredible success story, and a great European digital winner, Swedish digital winner, the most iconic, definitely Swedish company, I would say, in recent times. Okay, let's see if we can pull up Spotify's revenue and profit the last 5 years, because I believe they've actually really been able to increase their profit margin recently. No, of course, really. Is this up to date? So, they've had consistent revenue growth, probably around like 20% a year. They've been growing from 2019 to 2023. So 2023 looks like 13.25 billion euros. But actually, this is the issue at the end of the day, Emmanuel. Is like they're still losing money in terms of net income. Net loss each year. 532 million euros in 2023. So, see if they have any more recent data on this. It's funny, these days I turn to LLMs instead of even looking at like stock data because they're so much better at getting me that information.
I mean, I'm just looking at
So
Spotify
I
as
think
well.
this is what I saw Daniel Ek tweeting about, probably because just in 2024, Spotify reported an operating income of 454 million. So that was like a big turn for them, right? It was like finally profitable. You know what I mean? So it's a big shift because they've basically been losing money for years and years and years. Interesting. So I think hopefully we see that for their sake, that they can continue to, make money on this service and still win in this category.
Yeah.
So yeah, great overview of Spotify in the early days. And yeah, highly recommend you check out The Playlist on Netflix. Awesome documentary. All right, cool. So let's do a quick book review of The Launchpad. This is probably the best book that details the inner workings of Y Combinator. It goes into one of their winter batches. I want to say, let's see. So it was published in 2012. Let's see what batch it covered. I believe it was like 08 or something was the batch it actually covered. 2011. So it was the summer 2011 batch of companies that it covered, and goes through detailed stories of different companies in that batch, interactions with legends like Paul Graham, Sam Altman, and other YC partners, details of how the Y Combinator process works, what they're looking for in companies, what they're encouraging companies to do. And for me, I have 4 kind of key tactical takeaways from the book. Number 1, always be closing. They fund a lot of hackers and developers. And so they're constantly telling these guys to focus on sales and marketing, build at night, build the product features, but you got to always be closing. Growth over development is the second thing, which is very similar. It's like you have to focus on growth. You can't just build the product. You have to focus on growing it. And especially at YC, they're looking for these like parabolic startups that really have that word of mouth aspect to them. So they want to see that, and they want to see these companies really be able to catch fire and grow. So that goes on to the third tactic I had, which is high growth potential is non-negotiable. So they're not interested in steady growth businesses. Y Combinator wants to really hit it out of the park. So they want exponential growth. They want companies that can scale rapidly without requiring excess manual effort, such as one-to-one sales. And then they want word of mouth growth. So that kind of enables this high growth. They really want to see companies that you're going to tell your friend about. They're going to download the app. They're going to start using it. That was really, I was surprised to see that much of a focus on that. I should have known that if I knew more, but really interesting for me to see how much they want these hackers and developers to focus on growth and really look for exponential word of mouth opportunities where they can really scale their sales process. They do things that don't scale in the early days, But if your company ultimately needs somebody to go knock on a door to sell your product, it's not going to be able to get that exponential level that they're looking for. And then the top company stories, I think for me, although I don't believe it was actually in that summer 11 batch. Let me just double check what batch Twitch was in. Interesting to see. I actually use Grok for like information like this. So Grok was part of the winter 2011 batch. Twitch was part of the 2011 winter batch. And so in the early days, this was just in TV. This was in the days when the internet could barely handle streaming. And they basically, well, my main takeaway here was there were certain companies that were targeting a market before it was mature. And that was such a good strategy because it wasn't really even a viable market yet. You know, like you couldn't even stream video on the internet at a very high resolution. And it was such a niche idea. But they were eventually able to pivot this and focus on gamers and game streaming and have a huge success with Twitch. And so this was something that I saw that was a theme that some other companies in Y Combinator also did, where they focus on a technology like right at the right time when it actually doesn't really make sense to build that company, but they do the groundwork and they actually become the main player in that space for once the technology gets there and can handle streaming online. So that was really interesting. Second company that I thought was really interesting was Science Exchange. So they're actually with a female founder as well. And they were able to basically, in the academic world, a university might have a certain type of lab equipment that another university doesn't have. And that university wants to run an experiment on your telescope or your microscope or whatever lab equipment you have. And there's a whole kind of outsourcing of experiments market that was going on, and there was no software to coordinate this. So they were able to actually create like the backbone for universities to work together and say, oh, you have this like really powerful MRI machine, or you have this telescope, or you have this chemistry lab. Can you run this experiment for this research project that we're doing? And then they pay to have that done. And so I thought that was a super cool idea and really cool to see, you know, the story and details of that. Again, there's like eight or nine different companies that they go into detail throughout this on. So really interesting. And then Code Academy was really interesting too. Code Academy, basically the founders were working on several different ideas. Code Academy ended up being their third idea in this batch. So they were like almost getting to demo day where they present their idea and barely had something that they wanted to show. And all they had was like one JavaScript course, like a quick little, you know, I don't know, 10 little lesson JavaScript course, super basic. And they actually just posted it on Hacker News and got a bunch of coverage. And it turns out a lot of experienced programmers thought, wow, this is really basic. But a lot of people who didn't know programming loved it. And they actually caught fire. And Code Academy was very successful after that. So that was really interesting for me to hear about as well. And I guess I would also say, like, this is a book you should definitely read yourself. Like, the summary doesn't do it justice. There's so many details and tactics in this that are really interesting. And this is a book I'm going to go and read again to really try to soak up the knowledge. There's lots of discussions of one-on-one conversations with Paul Graham, lots of technical decisions, and also like the culture of what these entrepreneurs do. And these guys are all in. You know, some of these founders are away from their families for those months when they're in this actual batch. You know, the younger ones are obviously just living at the office and grinding away, just like those other ones. But people are making sacrifices and really working hard, iterating and moving fast to see if they can succeed. So, really, a great book on the inside workings of Y Combinator, and can highly recommend checking it out. So, it's my takeaways. Yeah. Awesome. All right, cool. So let's quickly dive into a quick overview on some of the stuff we're building at /dev. So I want to show you a little bit of information on how to build something like Asana. So currently we're building a task management system very similar to Asana. So when you look at Asana, you have different tasks. You can create a new task. You can assign a due date. You can assign users. You can go into that and create a subtask as well. You can create another subtask. You can assign people. You can do all the assigning. You can do notes. You can add comments. Really cool system for any sort of ERP application or anywhere where your teams are getting things done. And so I wanted to kind of quickly show you the architecture of what this type of system looks like. So if we look here, I've kind of taken the model from our backend and done a little bit of diving into kind of how this works. But essentially you have a table and you have all the tasks on that single table. So when we were first building this system, we were building a more simplistic version. We were working with JSON data for the tasks, and that doesn't really scale well. And so we moved more towards an SQL-based and Postgres single table where every single task, whether it's a subtask or a parent task, is on the same table. And you use a root and parent ID in order to differentiate. This means that if you are matching users, if you're setting a due date, if you're leaving comments, if you're tagging, you have all that same functionality across root tasks, subtasks, and then you have the tree structure of what is the parent task and what are all its subtasks. So I thought this was a nice architecture to highlight and a very common architecture you'll see for trying to build a system like Asana. And then we also have a beautiful front end like this built in React for handling all of this nice automation and task management system. So then, of course, you can rearrange this into things like a board, a calendar, and really coordinate everything that your company's doing. So that's definitely the recommended architecture, I would say, on the back end for building a task management system like this. And yeah, this is what we're doing for one of our clients in the storage industry right now. So yeah. All right. So let's wrap things up with some quick AI news. So OpenAI has released O3 and X is on fire about it. State-of-the-art performance in many categories, as to be expected. But what we also see online is we see that some open source models are starting to take some of the spotlight from OpenAI. So for the first time, we're seeing an open source model really be able to be trained on a far lower budget and achieve state-of-the-art status. So DeepSeek, which is a Chinese open source model, was released recently, and it was able to outperform Llama and GPT-4o. And if we look at, I believe, at a fraction of the cost in order to train it, and if we look at its performance, it's state of the art compared to other models. Claude, something I use all the time, outperforming Claude on everything here. No, outperforming Claude on everything but the SWE bench verified. So really cool to see. And what's great about models like this is then you can run it locally. This is open source. So you can download this. You can set it up on your computer if you have a GPU, and you can run this LLM yourself and get access to state-of-the-art performance. So yeah, really cool to see. Let's see if I can pull up a little bit more information. So they spent about $6 million to train it. I want to say that's like orders of magnitude less than what OpenAI is spending to train their models. Let's see if I can pull that up. Let's see if we can get data on how much OpenAI spent to train O3.
I find it kind of humorous as well that the reason why they named it O3 and not O2 is because of copyright issues.
Yeah, exactly.
I
It's
mean,
like
I know it as well.
Brian
So,
Armstrong, the CEO of Coinbase, was like, I have no idea what's going on with this naming strategy. Like, if this is an IQ test, I'm failing it. But yeah, so it's reported that OpenAI spent up to $7 billion in 2024 on training for its models. And GPT-3, a very old model, it was estimated they spent between 5 and 12 million. So, I mean, this is an open source model that's been able to be trained at a fraction of the cost, reportedly, and achieve state of the art performance. So, this is really exciting to see. Really cool progress in the open source community on AI. And then we have O3 released, we have Sora that was released recently. Google, maybe next week we'll jump into some of Google's video generation as well and what they're doing. But just continued innovation in AI every week right now. So really awesome to see. Anything you want to add, Emmanuel?
Nothing that you have highlighted already. I was just thinking about an article that I saw somewhere online talking about how 2025 just might be the year for us to see AI LLMs just explode. I'm very interested to see what it holds. We've started the new year now, and I mean we're already having updates about the O3 release, about Google's the new generation software. The list just keeps growing, and I'm just very curious to see what 2025 holds in store for us.
Yeah, exactly. Like, is Grok 3 going to be state of the art? Like, Llama also is training on a massive cluster. What's going to happen with that? So, yeah, I think we have so many performance gains still to come. Like, once we maximize the size of the training clusters, we're still going to get better, because look at what DeepSeek was able to do on a way lower budget. So there's going to be so much improvement here. And obviously text is like the perfect medium for training an LLM. So, how are we going to be able to transition that over to robotics and, like a robot operating system learning and improving how it operates? It's going to be awesome to see. So, yeah, stay tuned, and we'll try to keep you guys updated with the latest stuff we find from around the tech ecosystem. And yeah, time to get back to building. So thanks for the time. Cheers.